When I first bought the property, everyone told me I was crazy. Too far from town, too quiet, too isolated. And that's exactly why I bought it. I'd spent most of my life surrounded by people, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, barking dogs, lawnmowers at 6 in the morning. So when I found this little patch of heaven tucked between pine-covered hills, I didn't think twice. It had everything I wanted: a clear creek, an open meadow, and a small dirt trail that connected to the main road. The first thing I built was the bridge. It wasn't much to look at, just a simple wooden crossing, wide enough for my truck, with handrails I made from old fence boards. But to me, it was more than lumber and nails. It was independence. It was the line between the world I'd left behind and the peace I'd always wanted. That little bridge carried firewood in the winter, fishing gear in the summer, and my dog every single day in between. It held strong through floods, storms, and snow. It became part of the land, part of me. And that's why it hit me so hard the morning I heard that sound. It was a low, mechanical rumble at first, something that didn't belong out there. I remember stepping out with a mug of coffee in my hand, still half asleep. The sound got louder, deeper, until the ground itself started to shake. Then I saw it. A full-size cement truck, crawling its way across my little wooden bridge like a rhino on a tightrope. For a second, I couldn't even process it. My first thought was maybe someone got lost, took the wrong turn. But then I noticed the bright orange Community Project logo on the side of the truck, and that's when my stomach dropped. Behind it, another truck waited, engines idling, workers in safety vests shouting orders, dust rising like smoke. I ran down the slope yelling before I even knew what I was going to say. "Hey, you can't drive that thing across there. That bridge isn't rated for heavy loads." One of the guys just shrugged and pointed up the hill. "Talk to her," he said. And there she was, standing on the bank, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like she was inspecting an airport runway. Karen. I didn't know her then, but I'd heard the name. She was the HOA president, the kind of person who treated bylaws like scripture. Folks said she once fined a neighbor for having an unauthorized mailbox. Now she was on my property, watching a cement truck crush the bridge I'd built with my own 2 hands. I stormed up to her, coffee splashing over my boots. "What the hell is this?" I asked. "That bridge isn't yours to use." She smiled, tight, polite, like a teacher humoring a child. "Oh, this is all part of the Community Improvement Initiative," she said. "We're building a new multi-purpose center just across the creek. You'll love it." I blinked. "That's my land." She didn't even look down at the survey markers. "No, no," she said. "That's common area. It's part of the HOA jurisdiction." Now, I'm not the kind of man who likes confrontation, but something about the way she said it, like it was already decided, made my blood boil. "Lady," I said, "I built that bridge. I paid for every nail and board, and whatever project you're running, it's not crossing my land again." She tilted her head, still smiling. "I'll make a note of your concern," she said, "but please refrain from interfering with authorized work." And with that, she turned and walked away, like I didn't exist. By the time the truck backed off the bridge, one of the support beams had cracked clean through. You could hear it groan every time it shifted weight. I stood there for a long time after they left, just staring at that bridge. It wasn't just damage. It felt like someone had stepped into my life and left a muddy footprint right in the middle of it. That night, I sent an email to the HOA. No response. The next morning, another truck came. Same route, same driver, same destruction. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. They weren't lost. They were using my bridge on purpose. And if I didn't stop them, that little piece of peace I'd built would be gone by the end of the month. So I started keeping a notebook. License plates, dates, times, pictures from my phone. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the next morning, my bridge looked like it had gone 10 rounds with a wrecking ball, splintered planks, mud tracks stamped deep into the grain. One of the guardrails hung loose like a broken arm. I stood there staring at it, coffee in hand again, trying to convince myself it was just an honest mistake. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they thought it was part of the main access road. But then I saw the second truck coming. Same bright orange logo. Same thundering diesel engine. The driver didn't even hesitate this time, just barreled straight toward the bridge like it was his daily commute. I ran down the slope waving my arms. He slowed, rolled down his window, and yelled, "Karen said it's fine. HOA approved it." Karen, of course. I followed the truck up the path, across my cracked bridge, and into what used to be an empty field. Now it looked like a small construction zone, piles of rebar, stacks of plywood, and a big, smug woman with a clipboard barking orders like a general at war. "Morning," she called, spotting me like she'd been expecting this. "We're making great progress." I didn't return the smile. "You're building on private land," I said flatly. She squinted at me over her sunglasses. "No, sir. This is designated common space under Article 5, Section 2 of the HOA Charter." I pulled out my phone. "Yeah, because according to the county parcel map, this is still my property. See that marker?" I pointed to the little orange survey flag by the creek. "That's my line." Karen looked down at it, then waved her hand dismissively. "Those markers move all the time with erosion. We'll have it surveyed officially. For now, you'll need to allow the contractors access." "Over my bridge?" I asked. "Your bridge," she repeated, emphasizing the word like it was an inside joke. "That bridge connects both sides of the neighborhood, and it's on the HOA map as a shared structure. If it wasn't, you'd have to remove it." That's when I realized she wasn't just misinformed. She was manipulating the rules to fit her plan. And somehow, she believed she could get away with it. I took a deep breath. "Look, lady, I built that bridge before I even knew there was an HOA. I've got receipts, plans, photos. That thing's not in your jurisdiction and your trucks are tearing it apart." She gave me that same smile as before, polite, sharp, and soulless. "Don't worry," she said. "The association will take care of any damages." Then she turned back to her workers and shouted, "Let's keep it moving, folks. We're on a deadline." I just stood there, jaw tight, fists clenched, watching them pour wet concrete on my field. Later that afternoon, I tried to call the HOA office. No answer. I sent an email to their official complaint address, auto-reply. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I printed out copies of my deed, highlighted the property lines, and hand-delivered them to Karen's mailbox. The next morning, I found the envelope torn open on my porch with a sticky note that said, "Thank you for your input. The board has reviewed and determined your concern invalid." That was her handwriting. I'd recognize those sharp little letters anywhere. I was furious, but something about it made me laugh. The arrogance was unbelievable. She really thought she could bulldoze me into submission, literally. The trucks kept coming, twice a week. Sometimes early mornings, sometimes just before sunset, each one heavier than the last. My bridge started to sag in the middle, a visible curve you could see from 50 yards away. I tried to block it once, hauled some old logs across, and posted a private property sign. The next day, the logs were pushed aside and the sign was gone. Then that Friday, I got a letter taped to my front door. HOA notice of noncompliance. Apparently, I was in violation of community standards for obstructing shared access routes. They fined me $200. I laughed out loud, standing there on my porch, letter shaking in my hand. The sheer audacity of it all almost didn't feel real. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those trucks grinding across my bridge, crushing it plank by plank. I heard Karen's voice, sweet and poisonous, quoting HOA bylaws like a sermon. That's when I realized this wasn't about land or bridges anymore. It was about control. Karen didn't care about community improvement. She wanted to leave her mark, her own little empire in the valley, and my bridge was standing in her way. So I decided to start paying closer attention. I bought a trail camera from the sporting goods store and mounted it up in the trees by the bridge. I started taking photos of every truck that crossed, dates, times, drivers, company names. And then I started asking around, Turns out none of the homeowners even knew about the community center. Karen had pitched it in a closed-door board meeting with two of her friends. No votes, no public notice. When I mentioned that to one of my neighbors, he frowned. Wait, Karen said the county approved it. The county hadn't, I checked. By the time the weekend rolled around, I had a folder full of pictures, documents, and recordings. But the bridge looked worse than ever. One of the supports was cracked nearly in half, and if one more truck crossed, it might not hold. That's when I made a decision. If Karen wanted to keep playing games, fine, I'd let her. But next time one of her trucks rolled across my bridge, she was going to find out exactly how fragile her grand plan really was. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I'd had enough. I was tired of the trucks, the cracked bridge, the fake notices, and that smug clipboard smile. I'd spent the past week collecting evidence, photos, videos, property maps, even copies of the county's project approvals, or lack of them. I had everything neatly organized in a manila folder, labeled in bold letters, proof Karen's lost her mind. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in one of the neighbors' garages, because apparently Karen wanted a more casual community feel. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nothing about Karen was casual. She showed up early, of course, wearing that signature pink blazer she used for all official business. She had her little folding table set up at the front with a jug of lemonade and a stack of printed agendas. By the time I walked in, the garage was half full, mostly retirees and a few young families pretending to care while scrolling on their phones. Karen flashed me a quick smile, the kind that said, "I see you, and I already have a plan for you." "Welcome, everyone," she said in that sugary tone of hers. "We're here tonight to discuss progress on our new community center project and a few upcoming maintenance initiatives." I stood near the back, arms crossed. She clicked her little remote, and a slideshow started projecting on a white sheet hanging from the garage wall. The first image, my property, my field, with the words future site of Pine Ridge Community Center in bold letters. I actually laughed out loud. A few heads turned. Karen's smile faltered for half a second before she continued. "As you can see, construction is well underway. We're on schedule for the foundation pour and expect to have the framing started within 2 weeks." "On whose land?" I asked. She paused, feigning confusion. "Excuse me." I stepped forward, voice steady but firm. "You said construction is underway, but that foundation you're pouring, it's on my property, the same land that sits behind my creek where your trucks keep tearing up my bridge." A murmur ran through the room. Karen chuckled nervously. "Oh no, dear, that area falls within HOA-managed land. It's all in the survey." I opened my folder, pulled out a map, and held it up for everyone to see. "No, it's not. This is from the county assessor's office, updated 6 months ago. Lot 24B belongs to me. Here, the deed, signed and recorded." Someone in the back whistled quietly. Karen's jaw tightened. "Well, then perhaps there's been an error in documentation," she said, flipping through her clipboard. "But the project is already approved." "Approved by who?" I interrupted. "The county hasn't signed a thing. I called them myself. There are no permits, no environmental clearance, no inspection requests. You're pouring cement without permission on someone else's land." The room went silent. You could hear the buzzing from the fluorescent light above. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. She fidgeted with her pen, her voice cracking just slightly. "We're in discussions with the county. It's a formality." I shook my head. A formality doesn't involve heavy trucks crossing private bridges and destroying personal property. A few neighbors started whispering. One older guy spoke up. "Karen, you said all of this was cleared months ago. Did you lie to us?" Her eyes darted toward him, then back to me. "Of course not. We're a community, and this man is misunderstanding the paperwork." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You can call it misunderstanding if you want, but if one more truck crosses that bridge, I'm filing a police report for trespassing and property damage, and I'll include every one of your emails and meeting notes in the file." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Her face flushed red, but she tried to smile again. "Let's stay civil, shall we? I'm sure we can resolve this amicably. Then stop the trucks, I said. That's the only resolution I need. No one said a word after that. The meeting ended abruptly. Karen claimed she had another engagement and started packing up her papers while the neighbors quietly slipped out. When I left, she avoided eye contact. I walked home feeling half victorious, half uneasy. But that uneasy feeling didn't last long, because the very next morning, I found fresh tire tracks leading up to the bridge again. The boards were groaning worse than ever. I walked down, knelt by one of the supports, and noticed a fresh hairline crack running right through the main beam. One more truck, and the whole thing could collapse. I set my coffee down and just stared at it. Something inside me shifted, past frustration, past anger. It was that cold kind of calm that settles in when you realize you've run out of warnings. Karen wasn't going to stop. She thought she could keep pushing, keep bending the rules, and I'd just fold. But she didn't understand. This land wasn't some line item on a spreadsheet. It was my home, my peace, my work. So that night I went out to the shed, grabbed my toolbox, my headlamp, a few old boards. And I started making adjustments to the bridge. It would still look sturdy from above, good enough for anyone who wasn't paying attention. But the next time a cement truck tried to cross it, they were in for a surprise. That night I didn't sleep, not because of guilt, because of focus. My hands were steady, my mind sharper than it had been in months. If Karen wanted to play this game on my land, she was going to learn that some of us still believe in consequences. I waited until after midnight when the woods went quiet. The frogs were loud down by the creek, the air damp and heavy. I carried my toolbox and a lantern across the bridge, checking each creaking board one last time. Every sound echoed like a secret. My plan was simple enough: make the bridge look fixed, good enough to fool a careless driver, but weaken it in a way only weight would reveal. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, I just wanted to stop the trucks. Permanently. I started by prying up a few planks in the middle span and reinforcing the top layer with fresh boards. From above, it would look solid. Underneath, though, I replaced one of the main beams with a hollow support I'd built out of lightweight pine, strong enough to hold a pickup but not a 10-ton cement mixer. Then I filled the hollow space with soft creek soil and covered it with mud so it blended in with the rest. When I was done, I stood back and admired my work. The bridge looked perfect, better than ever even. Anyone walking across it would think I'd spent the night repairing it for real. I cleaned up, shut off my lantern, and sat at the edge of the creek for a while, listening to the water move under the beams. The moonlight reflected off the current like shifting silver, calm and endless. It reminded me why I bought this land in the first place. Peace, freedom, silence. I missed that silence. The next morning, the sun rose pale and cold. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch with my camera ready. The trail cam was already aimed at the bridge from the trees, but I wanted to see it for myself. It didn't take long. Around 7:30, the familiar growl of a diesel engine rolled through the valley. My heart started to beat faster, not out of fear but anticipation. I set the mug down, leaned forward, and watched as the same orange cement truck from before came crawling down the road. The driver barely slowed. He lined up straight, rolled onto the bridge, and for a moment everything looked normal. Then came the sound, a deep splintering crack. The bridge sagged slightly, groaning under the weight. The driver must have felt it because he slammed on the brakes. The front end of the truck dipped, and then, just like that, the center of the bridge gave way. The nose of the truck dropped through the boards with a crash loud enough to wake the mountains. The front wheels plunged halfway into the creek, the back tires spinning wildly on the bank. Mud and water sprayed everywhere. For a few seconds I just stood there, speechless. Then I started laughing. Not a cruel laugh, just the kind that comes when the world finally balances itself out. The driver wasn't hurt, thank God. He jumped out, waving his arms and shouting into his radio, probably calling for help. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Within minutes, Karen's white SUV came flying down the road, dust trailing behind it like smoke. She parked sideways across my driveway and jumped out, heels sinking into the mud. "What did you do?" she yelled. I smiled, calm as a preacher on Sunday morning. "Looks like your project hit a little snag." Her eyes darted from the half-sunken truck to the bridge, then to me. "You sabotaged it. You could have killed someone." "Funny," I said. "I told you the bridge wasn't rated for trucks. I even sent you the pictures. Maybe you should have read your emails." She fumed, red in the face, clutching her clipboard like it might protect her from reality. "This is destruction of HOA property." "It's my property," I said, stepping closer. "And now you've damaged it again. So either you start writing checks for the repairs or I call the sheriff and report unauthorized trespassing." For the first time since I'd met her, Karen didn't have a comeback. She stood there trembling, probably realizing how bad this looked. The construction crew had gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. A few took photos of the wrecked bridge. One of them muttered something about insurance and liability. Karen shot me one last glare before storming back to her SUV. She peeled out, kicking up a wave of dust as she sped away. I waited until the sound of her tires faded, then walked down to the creek. The bridge was broken, sure, but the message was clear. No one crossed this land without my say-so ever again. That night I sat by the fire, rewatching the footage from my trail cam. The crack, the collapse, the splash, it was all there, perfect evidence. I saved the file under the name Bridge Justice and smiled to myself. I wasn't proud of what I did exactly, but I was satisfied. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to let things go. But neither was I. When I woke up the next morning, there was a silence that didn't feel natural. Usually, the valley carried sound, the whisper of the creek, the distant hum of morning birds. But that day, it was too still. Even before I looked out the window, I knew something was wrong. I threw on my boots, stepped outside, and stopped dead on the porch. There it was, another cement truck, bigger than the last one, its tires already sinking into the damp soil by the bridge. The driver was outside, scratching his head, looking down at the bridge like it might bite him. And standing next to him, arms crossed, was Karen. She had that smug, tight smile again, the one she wore when she thought she'd already won. I took a deep breath and started walking toward her. "Morning, Karen," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "Didn't think we'd be seeing you again so soon." She gestured to the bridge. "The HOA board voted to continue development on the south side. You can't block access to community contractors." "Contractors?" I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, this road isn't HOA property. That bridge is private. I built it with my own hands." She smiled wider. "Then maybe you should have filed the right permits. You built on a shared waterway, which means the HOA has jurisdiction. Don't worry. Once this new batch of concrete sets, we'll have a proper road through here." That was it. That was the moment I knew she wasn't just pushing boundaries. She was declaring war. I didn't argue. I just stared at her for a moment, then said, "All right. You do what you have to, but you might want to tell your contractors to drive slow." Karen blinked. "Why?" I looked down at the bridge, because I wouldn't want anyone to get stuck. I turned around and walked away before she could reply. By the time I reached my porch, I heard the truck's engine rumble. The bridge creaked under its weight. The first few feet went fine, and then, just like clockwork, it happened. A loud snap echoed through the valley. The left rear tire dropped half a foot into the plank section. The driver slammed the brakes, but the damage was done. The entire front half of the truck tilted, spilling wet cement all over the creek's edge. Karen screamed something, but her words were lost under the grinding metal and splashing concrete. I didn't move. I just watched as the cement hardened fast, forming a perfect, heavy block across my old wooden bridge. The driver jumped out, waving his arms. "It's stuck. We're gonna need a tow." Karen's face turned red. "Do something. You can't leave it like this." I finally walked over slowly, like I had all the time in the world. "You know, Karen," I said, "I did warn you. That bridge was never designed for industrial traffic." She pointed at me, trembling with anger. "You sabotaged it." I shrugged. "Or maybe gravity just doesn't like your trucks." She stormed off, barking orders into her phone, while I turned toward the mess. The truck was blocking her route completely now, cement hardened right across the wooden planks. No one was getting across that bridge anymore. Not HOA, not her construction crew, not even the mailman. It took 2 tow trucks and most of the afternoon to drag that rig out. The damage to the bridge was total. The planks were cracked, the supports splintered, and half the railing was gone. But to me, it was a message delivered. When they finally cleared out, Karen drove off without a word. But her silence said enough. She wasn't done, she was regrouping, and so was I. That night I sat on the porch again, listening to the creek flow beneath the broken bridge. The moonlight shimmered off the water, and I caught sight of something I hadn't noticed before, a faint glint near the edge of the opposite bank. I walked down with my flashlight, kneeled by the embankment, and found it. Small, rusted survey stakes marked in bright orange paint. HOA boundary markers. Karen had moved them. That realization hit me harder than any truck ever could. She wasn't just crossing my bridge, she was rewriting the map to make it look like her development extended right onto my property. I stood there, staring at the glowing orange lines under the moonlight, my pulse steadying. If she wanted a fight over land, she was about to get one. The next morning, I made a call to someone the HOA never expected me to know. "Morning, Sheriff," I said when he picked up. "Remember that time you helped me with the flood cleanup? Well, I've got another situation. You might want to bring your camera." Because if Karen wanted proof of ownership, I had proof of fraud. And this time, the whole county was going to see it. By sunrise, the sound of hammering and diesel engines was gone. For the first time in weeks, the valley was quiet again. It felt strange, like the land itself was holding its breath. Karen's cement truck disaster had shaken everyone on the HOA board, but knowing her, she wasn't going to retreat quietly. She'd be planning something worse, something that didn't involve getting her hands dirty. So I spent that morning waiting. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, eyes on the bridge, or what was left of it. When I finally heard the familiar rumble of a sheriff's truck pulling up the gravel drive, I set my mug down and smiled. Sheriff Wilcox stepped out, hat tilted back, sun glinting off his badge. He was a big man with the patience of a saint, but I'd seen that look on his face before, the one he wore when someone thought they were smarter than the law. "Mornin', Jake," he said. "Heard you had a little traffic jam out here." "Morning, Sheriff. Yeah," I said, nodding toward the bridge. "You could say that. Karen's contractors thought it was a highway." He whistled, walking closer to inspect the wreckage. "Looks like that bridge has seen better days. You sure you're not running a demolition business out here?" I laughed. "Nah, just defending my property. Speaking of which, come take a look at this." We walked to the far side of the bridge where the creek bank sloped down. I pointed to the survey stakes I'd found the night before, half buried in the mud, each marked with neon orange tape and a tag that read HOA South Development Lot 21. Wilcox crouched down, brushing dirt off the tag. "Well, that's interesting. You saying these weren't here before?" "Not on my side of the creek, they weren't. My property line starts about 10 feet behind that fence. Karen's been moving them quietly. Probably thinks no one would notice under all the construction noise." He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the bank. "That's a felony, you know, tampering with boundary markers, surveyor fraud." "That's what I figured," I said. "Think you could get your camera out before she shows up to move them again?" He grinned, already on it. He took photos, dozens of them, from every angle, each time stamped. Then he called in a county surveyor to recheck the official coordinates. By noon, a white county truck rolled up, carrying a man in an orange vest and a tripod. The three of us stood there as he set up his gear, laser lines flickering across the valley like invisible wires. After about an hour of measuring, he turned to the sheriff. "Yep, your friend's right. Those stakes are a good 12 feet inside his property. Someone been shifting them intentionally." Wilcox sighed, writing something in his notepad. "Guess I'll need to have a chat with your HOA president." I looked down the road just as a silver SUV appeared. Speak of the devil. Karen's Lexus rolled to a stop near the tow marks, and she stepped out, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand like she was walking into a board meeting. She froze when she saw the sheriff. "Oh, Sheriff Wilcox, what brings you out here?" He didn't miss a beat. "Got a report about property tampering, thought I'd see it for myself." Karen's smile wavered. "Tampering? That's ridiculous. The HOA has full rights to maintain shared access points." "Shared," he repeated slowly, "isn't the same as stolen." He gestured toward the stakes. "County surveyor just confirmed those are over the line. You want to explain how they got there?" For the first time, she faltered. "I don't handle the surveying myself. Our contractors must have." Wilcox raised a hand. "Save it. We'll be filing a report. And until the county finishes investigating, you and your contractors are to stay off this property. No more trucks, no more construction. Clear." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She turned red, then pale, then red again. I just stood there, arms crossed, enjoying every second. She finally muttered, "You'll regret this, Jake. You don't know who you're dealing with." I smiled. "Actually, Karen, I think I do. You're the one who thought concrete and lies could cross a private bridge." Wilcox shot me a look like he was trying not to laugh. "That'll do, Jake. Let's keep it civil." Karen stormed back to her car and slammed the door. The tires screeched as she sped off down the gravel road, kicking up dust behind her like smoke after a battle. The sheriff turned to me, his tone calm again. "You might have bought yourself some peace, but something tells me she's not finished." I nodded. "Oh, I'm counting on that. Because next time she crosses the line, I won't just have pictures. I'll have proof she built her empire on someone else's land." Wilcox tipped his hat and walked back to his truck. As he drove off, I looked out over the creek. The shattered bridge, the hardened cement, the orange markers glowing faintly in the dirt. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. Karen might have the HOA board, the meetings, and her endless paperwork, but I had the land, the truth, and now the law. And that was a combination she'd never see coming. For a few days after the sheriff's visit, the valley finally felt normal again. No trucks, no workers, no Karen. The sound of the creek running beneath the broken bridge was almost peaceful, like the land itself was healing after weeks of intrusion. I fixed fences, cleared debris, and even started planning a new bridge, stronger, narrower, and entirely mine. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat. She didn't stop, she just changed tactics. And on the fourth night, just after sunset, I got my confirmation. I was sitting by the fire pit with a beer in hand when I heard it, a low rumble echoing through the trees. At first, I thought it was thunder. But then I saw the lights, headlights. 2 sets of them crawling down the dirt road toward my property like ghosts sneaking through the dark. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the sound, careful to stay out of sight. When the first truck came into view, I recognized it instantly, a dump truck. And behind it, a flatbed hauling concrete slabs. My jaw clenched. Karen was back. The truck slowed as they neared the bridge. They couldn't cross, not with the planks broken and the concrete lump from the last incident still hardened across it. But then I saw movement, silhouettes on the far side of the creek. 4 men, dressed in construction gear, moving fast, carrying what looked like metal beams and boards. They were building at night. Karen's SUV appeared moments later. She stepped out, flashlight in hand, barking orders like she was commanding an army. "Hurry up, we only need it sturdy enough to get across once. The rest we'll fix later." It hit me then, she was planning to move the construction vehicles onto my land before morning. Once they were here, she'd claim shared use and drag the HOA lawyers into another mess of paperwork. But this time, I wasn't going to let her rewrite the rules. I turned off my flashlight and moved quietly toward the creek. The moonlight was bright enough to see by, and I stayed low as I made my way to the water's edge. The temporary bridge they were building wasn't fancy, just a few metal sheets over wooden planks. It might have worked for a golf cart, maybe even a small truck, but not for what she was bringing. Then I remembered something. The day after the cement truck fiasco, I'd installed motion-triggered floodlights and a small security camera near the old oak tree just upstream from the bridge. I'd done it mostly for peace of mind. But now, It was about to expose everything. I reached into my pocket, pulled up the app on my phone, and hit record. Karen's voice carried across the creek. "Push it faster. We have a deadline. The county will approve the access point once this side's cleared." The men worked harder, sliding the final metal sheet into place. One of them waved at her. "It's ready." Karen nodded. "Good, bring the first truck across." That's when I shouted, "You do that and it'll be your last ride." The sound froze everyone. Her flashlight beam snapped toward me, and I stepped out of the shadows, boots crunching on gravel, phone camera still recording. "Jake," she said through gritted teeth, "you're trespassing on HOA business." I laughed. "On my property? That's rich. You're breaking county orders, Karen. Sheriff's report says no entry until the investigation's done." She smirked. "You won't call him. You don't want to look petty." "Petty," I said, raising my phone. "Nah, just cautious and live." Her eyes flicked to the red recording light. "Turn it off," she hissed. "Keep building," I said calmly, "and the whole county will see this by morning. HOA president caught trespassing and defying a sheriff's order. That's not just petty, Karen, that's criminal." She froze. The workers looked at each other, unsure what to do. Then, against her better judgment, she snapped, "Drive it." The dump truck's engine roared, its tires grinding over the metal plates. The bridge wobbled, groaned, then screamed. "Stop," one of the men shouted, but it was too late. The rear axle hit the edge, one of the boards cracked, and with a metallic shriek, the whole makeshift span collapsed. The truck's front end dipped nose first into the creek, cement dust spilling everywhere. Water splashed high into the air, drenching the workers. Karen screamed as she stumbled backward, barely avoiding the splash. The headlights flickered, then died. I walked closer, my phone still recording. "Guess your deadline just got pushed back." She glared at me, soaked and trembling with rage. "You think this is over? I'll rebuild it. I'll sue you for obstruction. You can't stop progress." I pointed toward her cruise truck, half submerged and leaking oil into the creek. "You just polluted a protected waterway, Karen. Progress isn't what you call it. The county calls that a fine and a suspension." Her jaw dropped, and for the first time I saw fear instead of fury. She turned, whispering something to her workers, but none of them moved. They were too busy staring at the mess. I walked back to my porch, leaving her there under the moonlight. By the time the sheriff arrived at dawn, she was still there, soaked, defeated, and surrounded by her own failure. When the sheriff's truck rolled down the gravel road at sunrise, it looked like a scene out of a bad dream. The dump truck still sat half submerged in the creek, its front end tilted down, its rear wheels barely clinging to the broken planks. Cement dust had crusted over the water, turning it pale and sluggish. Karen's SUV was parked crookedly on the bank, door open, papers scattered in the mud. And there she was, sitting on a boulder like a statue, soaked, silent, staring into the mess she'd made. Sheriff Wilcox climbed out of his truck, took one look, and just muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." He adjusted his hat, then looked over at me. "Jake, I told you she wasn't done." I nodded. "You also told me the law would catch up. Looks like it just did." Karen sprang to her feet, her voice cracking as she tried to pull herself together. "Sheriff, this was an accident. My contractors misjudged the bridge. I told them not to cross." Wilcox walked right past her, crouched by the water, and snapped a few pictures. "That's funny, Karen. The camera over there caught you shouting, 'Drive it.' You want to explain that?" She froze. "Camera?" He pointed at the oak tree above the creek, where the small black lens still blinked faintly in the sunlight. "Jake was smart enough to set up security, and lucky for him, that footage has already been uploaded to the county server." Her face drained of color. "You can't." "Oh, I can," he said, standing up and dusting off his hands. "You defied a direct county order, crossed onto private property, and polluted a protected stream. That's 3 violations in one night." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Even the creek seemed to hush. Karen's eyes darted toward me. "You think you've won, don't you? You're destroying everything the HOA worked for. We were building this community." I took a few steps closer, keeping my voice calm. "A community doesn't start by stealing land and ignoring the law. You wanted control, Karen, not community. Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. Wilcox sighed. You'll need to come down to the station, ma'am. We'll need a statement, and you'll probably want to call your lawyer. Karen didn't argue this time. She just nodded faintly and climbed into her SUV. The tires spun in the mud before catching grip, and she drove off without another word. When the sound of her engine faded into the hills, I finally exhaled. The sheriff turned to me, squinting at the broken bridge. You planning to fix that? Yeah, I said, watching the creek flow around the wreckage. But this time I'll build it right. No shortcuts, no shared access, no HOA interference. He chuckled. Can't say I blame you. Just make sure it's strong enough to handle whatever she throws next. She's done, I said quietly. She just doesn't know it yet. And I was right. Within a week, the county sent environmental inspectors. They confirmed the pollution, the tampered markers, and the illegal construction. The HOA board tried to distance themselves from Karen, but the footage made that impossible. She resigned under community pressure, though everyone knew it wasn't voluntary. I spent the following month rebuilding my bridge. This time I used reinforced beams, steel trusses, and a weight limit sign posted right at the entrance. I even added a small motion camera under the arch, not for revenge, just insurance. When the work was done, the new bridge looked beautiful, simple, sturdy, and proudly mine. I stood there one evening as the sun went down, the water reflecting orange and gold beneath the steel frame. The valley was quiet again, no trucks, no shouting, no concrete dust, just peace. A few days later, I got a letter from the HOA. It wasn't an apology, Karen wasn't capable of that, but it was something better. A formal notice that my property had been removed from all shared access routes and designated as private land. At the bottom, one line caught my eye. Future traffic to and from the development will take the North Road per county order. I laughed out loud. The North Road was twice as long and cost 3 times as much to maintain. Fitting, I thought. As I folded the letter, I glanced at the new sign on the bridge, private property. No trespassing. It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement. A reminder that some things, once taken back, should never be given away again. That night, I lit a fire by the creek, cracked open a cold beer, and listened to the sound of the water running beneath the bridge. For the first time in months, it wasn't just a creek anymore. It was a boundary between my peace and her chaos, between what's fair and what's forced. And as the flames flickered and the stars came out, I smiled to myself. Karen had her HOA, her rules, and her concrete empire. But me, I had the land, the truth, and a bridge that would outlast them all. Because in the end, the best trap I ever set wasn't for her trucks. It was for her pride. And it worked perfectly. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.